Okay, we are looking at reading passage 3 from the 2020-2021 Preparing for the ACT booklet. We are starting on page 37, and this video is only going to be reading the passage, and then I'll make a separate video for the questions. Remember that you need to read each passage in 3 minutes or less. On the day of the ACT, you bring a watch that does not beep or ding, and you put it face up on your desk to be able to keep track of the time. And you want to read each passage in 3 minutes or less. So one strategy would be to just read the first and the last sentence of each paragraph. Another strategy would be to read until you get to 3 minutes and then stop. I am going to read the whole passage, and if you would like to read while and listen to me, that's fine. The more senses you use, the better you remember. So if you're seeing it, hearing it, saying it, and writing it, like annotating, that's 4 of your senses, and your comprehension increases with each sense. Page 37, passage 3. The bold introduction says that this is a humanities. Remember, humanities is dance, music, theater, and literature. Humanities. This passage is adapted from the article The Quiet Sideman by Colin Fleming in 2008. Near the end of his 8 years as a recording session musician, tenor saxophonist Leon Chu Berry landed a short-lived spot with Count Basie's orchestra. Standing in for one of Basie's band's two tenor giants, Berry took a lead solo on "Oh Lady Be Good," and that's a song, it's in quotation marks. The 1924 Gershwin song that Basie had played for years. In the 28 seconds that the solo lasted on February 4th, 1939, we are treated to no less than the musical personification of mind and body working together in divine tandem. When you hear the recording for the first time, you're likely to wonder why you've never heard of Chu Berry before. Why you've never heard of him is pretty simple. A lot of hardcore jazz buffs don't know much about him. Berry was a solid session player who turns up on recordings with Basie, Bessie Smith, Fletcher Henderson, and Billie Holiday. But he did not cut many sessions himself as a leader, and when he soloed, he worked within the recording constraints of the era and the swing genre, fast-moving 78s with solo often lasting for a mere 32 beats. 78s are records, big records. I think that's right. Um, the people who loved Berry were, not surprisingly, other tenor players, a situation leading to the dreaded musician's musician tag. But that's not nearly praise enough to describe Chu Berry, who, when given opportunity, displayed a musical dexterity that would be envied by future generations of hornmen. Berry faced the lot of the other horn players, having to grind it out long and hard until something memorable burst through. The prejudices and the expectations of the listening public and the accepted wisdom of what is and isn't art in a given medium. In this case, swing was fodder for dance parties and not music worthy of study. Oddly enough, Barry's geniality might help explain his failure to court history's favor. It wasn't in his nature to call attention to himself or his playing. Born in 1908 into the black middle class in Wheeling, West Virginia, the laid-back, affable Berry attended West Virginia State in Charleston, where he switched from alto sax to tenor and exhibited the willingness to fit in that characterized his presence in so many dance bands. He was the rare artist who refused to put his interests above those of the band, even if that meant playing ensemble passages rather than taking a healthy allotment of solo breaks. College proved a training ground for Berry, the bandsman, as he teamed up with a number of amateur outfits. He never played simply to show off. Instead, he tried to bring out the positive attributes in any given situation or setting. Later, when Barry is performing with the Callaway Ensemble, we hear some ragged, out of tune playing until Barry's first few solo notes emerge. The other players, no longer languidly blowing through their charts, immediately surge up behind him, all fighting fit. Once Barry finishes his solo, the shenanigans resume. After making his way to New York, Barry immediately became a presence and soon was in demand. The great jazz orchestras of the swing era were fronted by musical directors and arrangers. Duke Ellington was preeminent, who drew the acclaim. The sidemen were musical traveling salesmen who sold someone else's wares in the best style they could manage. It was with Fletcher Henderson that Barry began to ditch some of the sidemen's subservient trappings. For starters, Henderson wrote in keys that were rare for the jazz orchestras of the day, and his somber, indigo inflected voicings were ideal for players of Barry's introspective approach to his instrument. Barry sounds as if he's being swallowed by his sax. Blues in C sharp minor, for instance, is odd, haunting, and ultimately relaxing. A Barry solo in it is slightly off mic, making the listener feel as though he's been playing for some time before we finally hear him. The effect is unnerving, as if we weren't paying close attention. In June 1940, Cab Calloway granted Barry a showcase piece called A Ghost of a Chance, the sole recording in Barry's career to feature him from start to finish. It was his body and soul, a response to Coleman Hawkins' famous recording, intended not as a I think it's riposte to a revival, but as the other half of a dialogue. Its rubato lines are disembodied from the music meant to accompany it, which is Spartan to begin with. This may be Barry's one and only instance of indulgence on a record, a cathedral of a solo in its flourishes, angles, ornamentations, reflexivity. If sunlight could pass through music, a ghost of a chance would funnel it out in the broadest spectrum of colors.